it's a long background because it covers over 45 years. I started with SAS in 1974, and that was in the same kind of position that you hold. I was a research analyst for the West Virginia Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And since it was our campus shared a campus with one of the branches of West Virginia University, they happen to have this program on their mainframe called the Statistical Analysis System. The way we were able to do our analyses is type them out on a bunch of IBM cards, bring them over to the computer center, run them, lo and behold, and we get our analyses. And I was doing that to support my obtaining a master's degree at Marshall University. And all of my degrees, BS, MS, and PhD, have all been in psychology or educational psychology. And so I received a very strong background in statistics, along with psychology and psychological research. And so having a tool to do the analyses, back then especially, you're talking 1974, so up until I learned SAS, the main tool that we had was what's called a rotary calculator, which you've probably never even seen, to where you actually had to crank a machine as many times as you needed decimal places analyzed. And if you wanted to do any kind of factor analysis, you actually had to do it by using index cards and hanging them from the ceiling. SAS made things a little bit easier. My background since then, like I said, I continued to work because I didn't go to school before the military. Spent 4 years in the U.S. Air Force. And when I got out, decided I really ought to go back to school if I wanted to get into a career that I'd enjoy. And so I did, and I went back and got a bachelor's, master's, and PhD. And my first position after getting my PhD was as an institutional researcher in Michigan at Mott Community College in Flint, Michigan. And my experience during all that time depended upon what software a company or institution happened to be using. And so I've been through a number of positions, and so it included using SAS to begin with. When I went with Mott Community College, they were using SPSS, so I had to become an expert in SPSS. And the same thing held true when I was working for the state of Michigan. And following that, I became a director of research for an independent contractor. And at that time, neither SAS nor SPSS had come up with a Windows version, but Windows had just come out. The PC had just been invented. And so we had to write our own software. So we had a staff of 25 people, I think 10 of which who were programmers. And we wrote our own analytical software and routines back then, beginning with the basic language, and then we moved to Pascal. And then sometime during my career, I met my wife, who happened to live in Toronto and moved here. And became the director of, I forgot the name of the position. It was the director, I think, of data management. Well, we were responsible for, and this was back in 1999, I believe. And I was working for the insurance industry in Canada, and I was responsible for the office that set the automobile insurance rates and the relationship of my background to how all of that. We set automobile insurance rates using predictive modeling. We use SAS to analyze the claims history for all insurers throughout the country, public and private, and use SAS to create a system that allowed us to analyze all the data every year, seeing what the risk, both in terms of frequency of claims and cost of those claims. And every insurer in the country adopted, and as a matter of fact still uses, that model and that system. I'm not involved anymore because I am now retired and on a separate retirement venture, which we'll get into later if you're interested. But in a nutshell, that's been my background. I've worked in numerous industries and areas, going back in the beginning, like I said, institutional research, and then moving on to educational evaluation. We were contracted to for a number of years to analyze the status and how well they were achieving their goals for Michigan Department of Education, Texas Department of Education, and then since we had a background that most people didn't have, and at the time when I was living in Michigan, and that's when they had numerous layoffs in all the industries. Most industries were downsizing, and we wrote the programs. This was not using SAS. This was using Pascal to manage the matching for the outplacement efforts, and we did all the outplacements for Stroh Brewery, General Motors, Ford Motors, Chrysler, and allied industries, Time Life Magazine, just to name a few of the folks we did it for. We handled all of their outplacements. What we did was wrote code that matched what employers were looking for and what the employees of those various companies' skills were. And that led on to our getting deeply involved with those industries because they liked what we were doing. They didn't have anything else that did it. And so we were hired to design the same and manage the same systems for handling their employee training and their tuition assistance programs. So in short, I've had a nice, interesting career that looked at numerous areas, and primarily my background was to find solutions for problems. The top strategy for me goes back years ago, and I think it's not just for SAS, but for learning any kind of program like SAS, is to know how one programs a computer to do anything. So general programming logic. I started with computers. Again, we're going back years ago, so now we're back to my high school days. My first experience with computers was wiring IBM accounting boards. If you're not familiar, do a Google search for the IBM 401 accounting machine. And when I went back to get my bachelor's degree, I learned how to program program in BASIC throughout my schooling, besides learning SAS and SPSS and biomed and numerous other packages that were available at the time. Had to learn to program in BASIC, Pascal, Fortran, and I'm sure numerous other languages that I've forgotten since then. But knowing how to get a computer to do something was critical in my mind, for being able to easily pick up a language like SAS or SPSS. Once you were able to do that, the main way or the main help that I found in learning those languages was working with them. Simply trying to find out how you could solve any problem that you happen to have by doing. Now those two are basic, so the basic building blocks, which I consider the first step in learning a language like that. A second critical help for me was being active on online communities, helping other people. For me, trying to help others solve problems actually was the best way back then for me to learn those languages, as well as helping other people trying to do the same thing. And that's held true to today. A language like SAS grows every year, and there's no way anyone can be expert in all of its facets. And so it's a continual learning curve. And going on forums like the first one that I was familiar with was one called SAS-L, SAS-L, which was basically a bulletin board that people would put questions on, and the rest of the world in that area would try to help folks show them how to do whatever it is the person was trying to accomplish. SAS-L still exists, but I think it's declined in popularity because it's kind of old mainframe type logic, or not logic, but mainframe type presentation. And it's been pretty much replaced by SAS started a similar discussion forum that they call the SAS discussion forums, or the SAS communities. And to this day, I still post occasionally on SAS-L, quite a bit on the discussion forums. And like I said, I'm retired, so it's not for me to trying to reach any career goals, but more a combination of paying it forward, if you will, by answering other people's questions. But just as importantly, it's the way I keep aware of what problems are people confronting, what solutions are they using, and for me, learning what's available and how to solve problems using a language like SAS. So the building blocks, the discussion forums, were the two principal things that I found essential to learn and keep up one's knowledge of SAS. The other being presentations. And so throughout my career, whenever I've had a chance to present a solution to a group, I would, whether that be at the local level, a regional level, or an international level. When you have to write a paper and present a paper about a topic, at least personally for me, to be comfortable doing that, I've got to know the topic. And so preparing and presenting such a presentation forces you, unless you want to look like a fool, to learn that topic as well as you can. Well, it's very much like teaching, so that you are comfortable presenting, can answer questions, and just as importantly, know when to say, "I don't know that answer." That combination of the three, so the building blocks, the discussion forums, which is another way of saying talking with the community, sharing, and presentations, I think are the three most important aspects for learning a language like SAS. All of them. I don't. One of the things that always fascinated me about SAS, and it's why I've stuck with it throughout the years, is because all of the functions and procedures that they add each year allows one to accomplish more than they did the year before. And what's important for me is that a piece of software can give you a solution. I'm not one very big on having to have one piece of software do everything, although the more it can do, the better. And for me, SAS has always provided that ability. And as a matter of fact, it's made it to where I don't have to use any other language as a primary tool. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that SAS can't have because they're a large commercial vendor who has to support the world. And unlike a language like R, that is freely available and has the entire educational community, or not the entire, but a large portion of the educational community supporting it. And so R will come up with analytical capabilities that SAS hasn't had a chance to include yet. But SAS does give one a way to run R code and bring the data, the results back into SAS. And if I'm having to do some type of data mining, for me, a language like R has been a lot more cost effective than trying to say annually pay for a SAS Enterprise Miner. For the kind of analyses I do, decision trees have been a principal tool for doing data mining. And other than decision trees, cluster analysis, what have you. And what SAS couldn't do, R could do, and so I'd be able to run R from SAS and get what I wanted. And so, like I said, the key for me is that a language can give you a way. Well, the procedures for me that have been my favorites, and same thing as the functions in SAS that have been my favorites, are the ones that I happen to need at the time that allows me to accomplish what I need to do. Closing word would be an advertisement. The one thing that I've been disappointed with throughout my career has been the placement industry. And it's gotten worse over time since, well, it used to be in my younger days when one was looking for work, you just pick up the newspaper, find out who had what. Well, there's two ways to it. I'm talking something I'm knowledgeable and something I've only observed. I've never had a problem finding work because I always knew the people in the field. They knew me and knew what I was capable of. And so whenever I needed a job, all I needed to do was make one phone call and I had a job. And that led me up from positions of research analyst up through directors, up through vice president, up through president levels. However, I don't think my background is the norm for the rest of the world. Obviously, a number of people have the same type backgrounds and have been able to move through their career paths as well. But I don't think that's the majority of people, especially the majority of analytical professionals. And back in my time, like I said, I know the way a lot of other folks would look for work, and I have to admit, I had done it too. The newspapers for each city always used to be the principal place where companies would post their positions, and people could look where they wanted to be, see what positions were there, and apply for them. And the newspaper industry has been supplanted in that area and not really replaced, because the online placement programs, websites, have so much in them that are they really applicable to a particular area like analytics? And I think the answer is no. And I've seen that in all the folks I talk to, both in industry and amongst the analytical community. People don't know how to find the positions they want, and companies don't know how to find the people. And so in my retirement, I've set up a website called analystfinder.com, which is trying to fill that void. I think it's something that the industry needs, and the companies that hire analytical professionals need. Namely, a free website that allows people to identify their skills, and using SAS in the background, basically put together the same matching routines that I used back in the 70s for outplacement. And hopefully that will catch on, because I think it's something that the analytical community needs. Those are my closing words.